harvest today, and no, I'm not talking about the watermelon, although I think maybe there's one or two that might be able to be harvested. We'll see. I have to check up on it, see how to tell when a sugar baby watermelon is ripe. Now in the foreground I ripped up something. If you remember what it was, I will show you now. There we go. It is a harvest of onions. These are not the Walla Wallas. These are just a yellow onion, and I planted them from a set, which is a tiny little onion bulb. They're pretty decent size. They're a medium-sized onion, and I'm pretty happy with what we got here. I had another harvest in the main garden, which was on the other side of the first row of tomatoes that borders the outside of the garden. There's the sunflowers. That guy has got to be 10 feet tall. Woo! Anyway, I've started to prep this garden already. I watered it down very thoroughly, so it's going to stay nice and moist and ready for the next planting in the garden. Okay, here is the harvest that I pulled out in that one section. Do you remember? It was garlic. And here is the garlic. There are 88 heads of garlic here. One thing that's cool about garlic is that if you plant 88 cloves of garlic, you will end up with 88 heads of garlic. Now they're all different sizes. Some are larger than others, but I think this is a pretty successful harvest. They have to stay under here in an airy place, and they'll dry out. The green leaves, stalks will die back down, and when it all probably takes a few weeks. All the green is gone, everything is kind of hardened off. The papery shell forms on the heads of the garlic. Then you can kind of cut the roots off, dust them off of all their dirt, cut off, I like to leave about an 8-inch stalk and then tie them up into bundles. But that's what we've got here. And so I've got the onions, and they're going to go down here too. I'm going to put up that screen door right next to the garlic, and they're going to do roughly the same thing. Their stalks are going to dry off. I have them in the the wagon. I have them in the wagon, and the green tops will dry off. Their skins will get papery. You can kind of clean them up and cut the stalk off when it's all dead, and they're going to cure under here under the porch. So that is part of a nice large harvest. Garlic and onions. And what's going on down in this section of the garden? As you can see here in the foreground, this is strawberries, but they look on the little thin side. I've been working hard. I've been pulling out, thinning them out, getting ready to let them spread their runners, and so it will be better for them for next spring's harvest. So watered it all down. I'm going to have to water a few more times to make it nice and moist, and then I'm going to top dress it with probably some pine shavings from the chicken coop. Now, if you'll notice there where I have the cardboard, what was growing on this trellis before was the sugar snap peas. In the hot weather, they kind of shut down, and even though they had a few more blossoms to produce peas, I just decided to rip them all out. Again, I super saturated the soil, and I put cardboard down to keep the moisture retained in the soil. But first, before I put the cardboard down, I planted another planting of sugar snap peas. Hopefully they'll grow and flower and start producing peas before the frost. Just kind of an experiment. I think one year I was semi-successful in planting peas before a frost. We'll see what happens this year. You'll just have to stay tuned for that. Good morning, all. Beautiful, hot. It's gonna be hot today. Sunday morning, into the garden. After harvesting the garlic on this side, I think these tomatoes will do much better. More airflow down at the bottom. I think that they were suffering a bit. Here we have a Tigerella, which is starting to turn. I had hoped that these would be a little bit bigger, but I read up and that's probably as big as they're gonna get, but they will be striped. I can't wait to see that. I've been harvesting the beets here, and I think I can get another crop in for a fall harvest. And that is the theme of our video this week. As you can see, I'm not growing chewy boxes, but I've wetted down the area and it's nice and damp, and the cardboard is going to keep the area cool. So I planted a few more beets and a couple rows of carrots. Now carrots definitely do not like the heat, so I am thinking that this will keep the soil cool enough so I can get some germination of those seeds. And remember, I put boards down before, and this time I'm going to use some cardboard. I'll pull them up and water them occasionally, but put down the cardboard until I get some good germination, and hopefully that'll keep them cool. After germination, I'll probably put some kind of a shade tent over them for at least a few weeks so they get a good head start. The tomatoes on this side are doing just fine. Lots of foliage, lots of good foliage. Oh, I wanted to show you. This is the ground cherry. Now this is a relative of a tomatillo. I think I told you before. And you can see I do have some fruit coming on. And it is a papery shell like a tomatillo. And then you can tell they're ripe when they drop off and they hit the ground, thus calling them ground cherries. I've never had them before, and I'm excited to try them. They say they're a sweet little, kind of like a berry type of a fruit, or probably, you know, like a cherry or something. Things are doing very well down this side. I wanted to highlight the Hungarian hearts. These are enormous. Look at that. And the shape on that, definitely a heart. Very heavy, very heavy. Looks like we have a small one starting to blush up. Makes me extremely happy. Now, this cluster is just out of sight. A couple big ones, some small ones. This is blossom end rot. Not quite sure. Some people say it's a calcium deficiency, but I have a couple of those. But look at how, these things are so heavy. Here's a couple more hiding underneath the foliage here. It's a paste kind of tomato that I'll be using for sauces and such. Here's a big one up here. This is a Genovese, I think. This one, look at how huge he is. I'm gonna weigh some of these when I pick them to see how much they weigh. Anyway, these I don't think I painted out before. Let's see if I can get a good picture. This is called Cascade. Oh, there we go. Cascade. They're a medium fruit, and they just have a cascade of fruit. Anyway, so these are doing fine. Midnight Snack are turning red. See the reddish on there? I'm so tempted to pick them. I'm not sure when they will be ripe. I may just pick one to try it and see, but these clusters are so gigantic and just round and beautiful. Uh-oh, look what happened. One fell off. I guess it means it's ripe. Look at that lovely, lovely fruit. Purple shoulders on it, the round red bottom, no cracking, which is good. Sometimes cracking occurs when there's too much water. Of course, we haven't had too much water. I've had to water all the time. Okay, I'm getting ready to plant again on this side too, with the cardboard, watering thoroughly, making the soil super moist, and then planting. Although this is going to be some lettuce. I still have some chicken lettuce here that's going to seed, but I'll be picking it over the next couple days to give to the chickens. But this row is going to be some lettuce. It's going to benefit from the shade of these tomato plants. So hopefully it will survive and will give us lettuce into the fall. So another portion of our fall garden. And then of course the edamame is, it's up to my waist. And the cantaloupe is growing up onto the trellises, holding on. I'm using a little help. It's getting a little help from me. We do have a cantaloupe that fruited down here on the ground, so I put a little straw under it so it would stay up off the ground and it wouldn't rot. But I do have lots of little ones. Of course I can't find any right now, but there are lots of little ones on these vines. Here's a small one up here. There we go. Now here's another space that I'm going to transition to fall garden. I have broccoli down at the further end. I picked all of the heads, but I'm going to leave most of them to see if I get some side shoots. You know, little tiny broccoli crowns that come off the main stem. In the foreground, underneath the tent, I have cabbage. That's starting to head up, but when that reaches its peak, I will pull those out, cut the cabbage heads off, pull those out, and plant more broccoli. I have seeds growing in the house, starting in little container packs and some seed starter, and they've germinated and are sprouting, but they don't, again, like hot soil either. So I will cool it down. What I have here right under me is a section that's been covered with cardboard all season. So I will pull that up, fluff it up a bit, see if it needs some amendments or anything like that. And this is where I'll plant an additional probably 12 heads of plants of broccoli in addition to the spot. And I'll cover it just like I did with the row covers for that area. So that's another addition to the fall garden, a way of extending your season with more harvest. Hello, welcome to the hot, hot, hot heat of summer. We're right in the middle of almost primo harvesting time. As you saw in the video, we harvested onions and garlic, and I decided my peas were all finished. So what else is to think about but a fall garden? That's our theme for this week. And you think, what? Fall garden? Fall is so far away. Well, not really, especially when you have new plants to grow. So I encourage everybody to think about what you're going to do with those empty spaces in your garden. I have empty spaces where I dug up my onions and my garlic, and I've been digging up beets and the peas. No gardener wants empty spaces in their garden. So first, let me touch on what I have been harvesting, even those things that I haven't been pulling up yet. Beans, yes, the yellow beans, they are doing very well. We've been harvesting every single day, eating most of them. I haven't had an opportunity to put any up, but as you saw in the arbor up here, where I'm sitting under in the shade, it's not so cool, but it's a little bit better than being out in the sun. We'll be picking these beans probably in a day or two. So we are in the beans, and then I'll probably start freezing some. Lettuce is about done. The only lettuce left is the chicken lettuce, and they're still happy about that. Tomatoes have started. We have cherry tomatoes only. I don't have any of my big slicing tomatoes, or haven't been able to start processing any of the paste tomatoes yet. Squash, we've gotten a number of squash, the yellow and the zucchini, and then of course beets. So so anyway, thinking about fall gardens, it's really time to start. No gardener wants a blank space in their garden. It only promotes more weed growth, and who wants to weed something that's just a blank canvas? So let's put something in those spaces. So you have to think ahead. You have to think about when your first frost date would be, and then you'll take a look at your seed packets. Take a look, see what is a cold tolerant plant, and count back from that and decide upon what day would be the best day, the earliest day that you can start planting. So I've planted beets, I've planted more carrots. We are still in the heat of the summer, so you have to protect a lot of these young seedlings that don't like the heat. You have to protect them from the sun, which is what I've been trying to do. So for a fall garden, some of the benefits is there's less pest pressure. As the weather cools down, the pests kind of go away. They finished their life cycle. They're done for their season. And so you really won't have too much to worry about because they're gone. You just have to wait till next year to worry about them. Things like powdery mildew is very less prevalent in a fall garden because it thrives in moisture and heat. So those are two things a benefit of the fall garden. Anyway, you do also have to think about your daylight, your sun, the amount of sun. The sun will be getting progressively lower in the sky. You will lose more daylight hours as we go towards the equinox. See what you can make sure that you're going to be planting in a space that's going to get the sun that it needs, you know, the 6 hours, the 8 hours, or whatever it might be that it needs. So anyway, but that's what I'm planning these next week to get in some more seed to see if I can beat Mother Nature and beat her at the frost game. So anyway, if I can give them a little protection as closer it gets to our frost date, which is about the beginning of October someplace, if we're lucky, we could stretch it till the end of October. Maybe I'll get some additional harvest. I did mention in the video about blossom end rot. You saw my tomatoes. I had that trio of tomatoes that had blossom end rot. We have a few others that do. What it is, it's a deficiency in calcium. Now when I plant my tomatoes, I plant in a few tablespoons of crushed up eggshells. Thank you, girls. One benefit of having chickens, you can do it very organically. And so I put that in each hole. Well, what happens is there's a lot of vigorous growth when a tomato is first planted, the young seedling. And if there is not enough moisture for the tomato, the roots, to take up that moisture, it's not going to get that calcium that travels up the roots into the stems. And so it's a deficiency on, it usually happens on those first blossoms of a tomato. So my lower trio, like that was a trio of those paste tomatoes, they will often have blossom end rot. And I do have a few out there, not a whole lot. Everything else seems to be doing just fine on that. So next year I'm going to keep my eye on that and make sure that there is sufficient moisture that's going to move that calcium up the stems and support that growth habit of the tomatoes, and so I won't get the blossom end rot. Okay, so I did get a question from Abby about which fruit/vegetables can you harvest the longest in a season. Well, I gotta say, let me talk about beans first since I'm sitting in here. Beans, you can get a harvest. Generally, it's a flush at first, so you just are overwhelmed by the number of beans, and then it dies down and kind of trickles off a little bit. But if you wait, you will get a second harvest of beans. You have to be patient. More flowers will start coming on. You won't get a large harvest, but you may get a few more. And peas, even though I pulled those peas up, there were flowers and blossoms, a few. But more or less the heat is working against you with peas. With beans, love the heat. Peas, not so much, so I pulled them up. And I'm going to try and beat Mother Nature and get in another harvest before the frost. Squashes will go on forever, or nearly forever, but at some point squashes and melons and things like that, like the watermelons even, are looking rather poorly. The plants, not the watermelons. They will say, oh, I have a fruit here, and it's got seeds in it. And I just want them to develop, and so they can propagate future generations. And so they may just say, okay, one plant, I've given you 3. That's enough, I'm done. And they're done. It's usually, and often they're affected then by the amount of daylight that they get too, and they'll just kind of shut down. But we have tomatoes in the garden, and I do think tomatoes is one of those plants that will keep on. And the only thing that's going to stop it is a frost or much cooler temperatures to really slow it down, because it's a vine too, and it keeps going. I think I mentioned one of the earlier videos, you can get it 10 feet if you wanted. I don't have anything to support 10 feet. I don't know what I'm going to do if something does get to be 10 feet. But I do think tomatoes, Abby, that's the answer to the question about which one would do the longest. Grandpa also asked, he did ask about the amount of sunlight and stuff that it takes plants. Plants are susceptible. A lot of plants they do have a requirement to have 8 hours in order to have a decent harvest. They do require, some require 8 hours, some are, only need 6 hours of direct sunlight. And as we go through the course of the season, of course, as I was saying, that the sun sets earlier, and the trajectory of the sun in the sky as we get towards the equinox is less and less. So anyway, that's going to be it for this week, and I certainly do hope that I get some more questions, and I hope you're very interested in what's coming on in Grammy's Garden for next week, and I'll think up some great new content again for next week. So stay tuned for the winner of the question of the week, and continue on, and happy gardening.